Okay, folks, it's your buddy Mike Messier. Thought I'd do something a little different. I'd take the Mike's Instant Movie Review on a walkabout. So I saw an interesting movie tonight, The Relentless Patriot. One night only event. This movie will probably be on some type of streaming sooner or later. I would think sooner. But tonight it was in the theater on a Thursday night in June of 2024. June is kind of an interesting month. It's kind of a foreshadowing to July. So let's get into it. What did I think? Should you see this movie? Should you not? I think it's a good movie to see. I think there's some things I would have done differently than the auteur, the filmmaker. I believe the name was Christopher Martini. The subject matter, Scott Lebedo, if I'm saying that correctly, Scott Lebedo. Artiste, he is the Patriot, the Relentless Patriot artist. His subject matter for a good portion of his career, at least the famous stuff, is the American flag, the stars and bars. He refers to it as the Star Spangled Banner at one point. I thought that was just the song. I could be wrong. But in any event, this movie, most of it seems like Scott's from Staten Island. He's very proud of that fact. I do have some friends in Staten Island, Evan Ginsberg, Monty and the Pharaoh, all these wonderful Staten Island people. I've been there myself. Interesting gentleman. I've been there myself once, and I did enjoy myself for the brief time I was in Staten Island. But a lot of the film takes place over the bridge, as they would say, in New York City. A lot of the events, political events, Scott has gotten himself into or interjected himself, are New York City events and protests. I guess you would call Scott a conservative protest artist, activist. He makes no bones about it. He's a Republican. He's a Donald Trump supporter. The opening montage of the movie kind of ties Scott in his endorsements with Donald Trump. That caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting that as part of this movie. As you may or may not know, I don't like to watch previews a whole lot. I went into this movie thinking, I don't know what I was thinking. I was thinking, see, I don't watch the previews. I just thought it was something about a guy who likes the American flag. I didn't know that Scott's political affiliations were so deeply tied into his career and identity. But hey, I'm there. I want to see the movie. When I first walked towards the theater, I had a funny little moment. I was kind of wearing my headpiece. I had my Brian Pillman t-shirt on. I suppose I looked a little unique. And there was these two young ladies. They looked like, mid-teens, sitting there probably waiting for a ride to pick them up. And as I walked by them, I heard one say, I guess she was saying this to me, "Will you be my dad?" So I did not respond. I didn't have a fucking funny comeback. I don't, kids, when they say these things, I never know if they're making fun of me or having fun with me or insulting me. I'd like to think it was a humorous comment. It seemed like once I thought about it, it was fucking funny. Because I guess I looked at my massive size. I looked like a father figure to this young woman. And it was just funny. And for whatever it's worth, she was of African-American descent. So the humor was really off the charts now that I think about it. So good for her. But I wish I had a funny comeback or something, or a positive word. Maybe she needed some positive light on her night. I didn't have anything. Like, there was no comeback for that. It was just funny. But who knows? Maybe it was poignant. So anyway, going back to Scott, once I got into the auditorium, see, I always decipher. See, that The building itself is the theater. I call each room an auditorium. That's how I decipher these things. The auditorium, first off, I was the only one in this auditorium for this exact film. I think most of the movie, like today is Thursday, so there's some new movies starting. I think, what's her name? Elaine from Seinfeld has a new movie starting tonight. Julie Louis-Dreyfus. Bad Boys is still doing well. There's Inside Out 2. This movie kind of got lost in the sauce a bit. I was the only person in the auditorium for this presentation. And I also noticed this movie was not playing in other states. I was trying to reference a friend of mine to see in Massachusetts, but it was not playing near him. When the movie started, and also during the previews, I noticed the volume was not very loud. It was passable. I could hear it. It just wasn't comfortable. Now, a normal asshole would just sit there in the theater and just silently be miserable, and just after the movie ended say, oh, I couldn't hear anything. I'm the type of asshole, I'll get out of my goddamn seat, I'll walk down the aisle. I had to wait patiently. There was nobody at customer service. The young man taking the tickets or zapping the phones had a lot of customers to zap. And so I waited patiently and I alerted him of the audio issue. He said, I'll ask if they can fix it. He got on his little walkie-talkie. I went back into the auditorium, and within about 3 minutes, the volume was properly raised. I don't know if I missed anything vital. That scenario probably cost me 4 minutes of the movie. That's the downside of being the type of person that respects audio, respects the viewing experience. I want to hear the fucking movie comfortably. I don't want to strain to hear the dialogue and so forth. If there had been other patrons in the theater auditorium, which there were not in the auditorium, I would be doing them a favor. But in this case, I was only doing myself a favor. I get back into the screening. I do like when I'm the only person in an auditorium. I feel like I have a private suite, a private viewing. Here's my things with documentaries. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Conflict. That's the most missing ingredient to documentaries. Even an otherwise well-made documentary like this one, a very interesting personality profile, I do feel like Scott's story has tons of conflict. He's a married man. We really don't get into his personal life. I believe he has a younger brother who at one point wanted to go on one of Scott's road trip adventures, and Scott wouldn't let him go with him. There seems to be some lone wolfness to Scott, I think could be explored. The political stuff, you know, Scott's been arrested or detained by the police several times for his activism art. I would have liked to have gone into deeper depths with that. They do scratch on it. They just don't really dig. Also, you know, Scott's a Trump guy. That's his prerogative. I would have liked to have seen Scott's emotions and visceral reaction to January 6, 2021, the Capitol riots, whatever you want to call it. Some of Scott's, you know, emotions and his defense, and I share this with him, of the American military and the American police. The American military and the American police are very dear to Scott's heart. I respect that. I would have liked to have seen Scott's, you know, thoughts or reactions to January 6th. Did that situation conflict? You know, if Scott, which I do believe him as such a patriot and so forth, I believe at least one U.S. police officer was killed during the January 6th riots, which, you know, you say what you want, but to me, Trump provoked that situation. At least he didn't do everything he could to prevent it. And I feel like Scott's, you know, How did Scott stand on that once that situation broke down? Of course, we may not get that because Rudy Giuliani is basically the second from the top talking head in this film. Giuliani actually sounds pretty good in this movie. He sits at a desk. He just talks about Scott for the most part and Scott's role in things. And Giuliani looks, very official and all that. But I guess that being said, you're not going to find anything in this film that shows any type of conflict within Scott of his support of Trump. But what I really enjoyed, because that Trump stuff really bookended the movie, like the first 5 or 6 minutes and then maybe the last 20, I found the stuff inside of that more interesting. And Scott has a lot of good quotes, a lot of good sound bites. A smart guy. And he does have that New Yorker thing where he swears all the time and fucking, everything is fucking. And it's fun to listen to a New York guy say fucking a lot. It's just good. Like, New Yorkers are good swearers. They swear well. They curse well. And, Scott will, when Scott's talking, he just kind of like, you don't know when he's actually citing something in reality or he's just making some crazy shit up. Either way, it's highly entertaining. If you've ever seen, when I was a young man, I saw Eric Bogosian in New York City do a one-man show called Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. And just that agitated, mid-sized, 5'8", ethnic New Yorker who swears is just a great, like, a 10-hole American to me. So Scott LeBedo fits into that quite well. Interesting that they had a lady, the talking heads, they had like Scott's wife, some friends, a brother, and a former girlfriend, which I thought was interesting. I think it might have been interesting to, hear the former girlfriend. Is there an interesting story perhaps of why she is a former girlfriend? Is Scott too intense for her, or was he too intense? I feel like, once again, when these documentaries that are kind of like personality profiles, and I've said this about many films, biopics and so forth, when the filmmaker is trying too hard to protect or to, make the subject matter look good, it's good for the subject matter, but it's not necessarily good for the audience. I feel like we could have gotten into some of the dark side of the eccentricities of Scott. He does admit he's a heavy smoker, he's a drinker. Let's go down that path, shall we? Let's walk that aisle. Let's explore his addictions, or close to addictions. Basically what I'm saying is it's kind of a shine piece. You know what I mean? It's kind of a, hey, this guy is so awesome and so great. And okay, but what else do you have? You know what I mean? But I liked his art for the most part. I think Scott's a cool guy. And he's done a lot for communities. The veterans really love him. He's gone to every U.S. state and painted a giant U.S. flag mural. That was really interesting. And I think Scott has a good heart. And I do think the doc was well made. I feel like it could have been more. We could have, if you really want to make a complete film, Chris Martini, we do need to see some of the shit as well as the shine. We need to see some of the flaws, some of the cavities in the shining pearly teeth of the subject matter. And like I said, when you have these movies that they're really, in some regard, it feels like an infomercial to Scott and his works and to his thoughts. It's not a complete thing. Some of his cartoons, and there was a quote from one friend towards the end that said, like, art can be divisive or something, she was saying, and they showed a couple of little cartoons of, it looked like Michael Moore, the documentarian, and Scott had done some type of, antagonistic or mocking Michael Moore. And he's done that with Biden and so forth. But Are there some stories there? Are there some anecdotes of Scott? Does he ever regret doing some of this stuff, or has there been some hurt feelings along the way? I don't know. I'm just saying, I don't think that they left that stone unturned, which was the negative side of all the stuff that he's doing. Because look, as an artist, and I can understand this, you know, as a visual artist, you might have seen one artist, Mike Messier, My Wonderful Acrylics. There's a plane. My Wonderful Abstract Acrylics on one Mike Messier. You might have seen, you know, for me, art shouldn't be restrained or shouldn't be censored and so forth. But I would like to see more of a conversation in this documentary about some of perhaps negative stuff, or people that were opposed to Scott. You know, some of these talking heads that were so pro-Scott, we could have replaced 2 or 3 of those with some anti-Scott guys. You know, if you want to paint a picture, then paint with all the colors, okay? So anyway, The Relentless Patriot, I do give it a thumbs up. I do give it probably 3 out of 5. I was more intrigued by the subject matter, Scott himself, than I wasn't. And I did like all the footage from the 90s and so forth. And they did do a good job with the archive footage and seaming it all together. I just feel like it was not a complete picture because, you know, conflict, man versus man, man versus nature, man versus himself. I'm not really sure watching this, you know, man versus the system, it felt like. But I feel like of all the conflicts we could have had, the man versus himself, like Scott's own inner turmoil, and just looking at the guy, you know that there's something there. I mean, like I said, he said it himself. He does smoke a lot. He does, you know, drink a lot. He swears a lot. He's one of these edgy guys that's just like a tightly coiled guy. He even goes into this thing about the rattlesnake. The rattlesnake is you can only find it in North America. That was interesting. Scott has a nice quote where he says, hate the war, don't hate the soldier. Hate the war, don't hate the soldier. I haven't heard it so succinctly, but I agree with that. I mean, a lot of this stuff that the guy is saying, I agree with. I just feel like if you're going to make a doc, if you're going to be in there for an hour and 40 or 50 minutes on a human being, we need some warts. We need some warts on the fingers, Martini. You know what I mean? We can't just say how great this guy is and what a patriot he is and shish boom ba. Okay, well, now I know who Scott is. But as far as a film just being a film on its own, I don't know if this film stands up as a great documentary. I mean, you know, and there's different types of documentaries. Look, Michael Moore, his documentaries are often criticized by film pundits, documentary film pundits, saying that Michael Moore goes into a documentary with an agenda. You know, he's trying to prove a point about healthcare or about guns or about, you know, water or whatever the fuck, or the car industry in Flint, Michigan. So he goes in kind of with an agenda to make a point, and then he does whatever he can to make his point. And with this movie, it kind of falls into a similar trap, which is we're going to introduce the world, or at least people that don't know about Scott, to him and to his art, but we're going to paint a very favorable picture. And I need some negative space, Martini and Scott. I need some negativity to really endorse this film totally. But, you know, that's just me. I mean, I have high standards for this thing we call film, we call cinema. So anyway, folks, like I said, reflecting upon the evening, I wish I had a snappy comeback for that young lady and her friend that asked me to be their father, or just the one. Funny, you know what I mean? It's like, are these kids making fun of me? Are they making fun with me? You know, humor, or it's poignancy. Who the fuck knows? I mean, But the audio, I fight for the audio, okay? Just like Scott fights for America, I fight for good audio. MikeMessier.com, Fight or Play Basketball, my artwork on one artist, Mike Messier, one Mike Messier for your Mike's Instant Movie Reviews, one Pro Wrestling and Sports Fan YouTube channel, my films, one Man and a Camera Films YouTube.